Planning Commission meeting to order Wednesday, June the 22nd. May I have a roll call, please?
Amanda Denmark.
Here.
Charlie Whitmore.
Here.
Jim Flynn.
Here.
Rich Delcor.
Here.
Lydia DePaul. Here. Kathleen Duncan. Here. Jason Stewart.
Notice regarding adjournment. The Board of Planning Commission will not hear new items after 9:30 p.m. unless authorized by a majority vote of the commission members present. Items which have not been heard before 9:30 may be continued to the next regular meeting or an additional meeting date as determined by the commission members. Notice regarding public comment. Every member of the public who is recognized to speak shall address the chairman and in speaking avoid disrespect to the board and commission, town staff, and other members of the meeting. State your name and address when speaking for the record. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. May I have an adoption of the agenda?
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Adoption of the minutes from May the 25th. Have a motion?
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Liquid public comments. For those who have comments pertaining to an agenda item before the commission this evening, you will have an opportunity to comment before the commission votes on the item. You are welcome to hold your comments until then or voice your comment at this time. Do we have any public comments?
We do. Mike Raymond.
You will speak your name and address, please, for the record.
Madam Chairman and Commissioners, good evening. My name's Mike Raymond. I live on Ginkgo Lane in Old Town Bluffton. I've only got 3 minutes, so we gotta roll. I'll start with a question. Which sounds better to you? We've tried for years to recruit primary employers to Bluffton, but we've never had any success. Or, recruiting primary employers to Bluffton has never been a priority, but we support our local businesses. I'm going to let you decide what the comp plan says on that. But it also says this, that less than 17% of Bluftonians work in Bluffton. That should be a 5-alarm bell right there. Where do the people work? 1/3 of them are in food service and retail. Sectors we know don't pay great wages and don't generally offer career advancements. Another 1/3 are in the public service sector, government jobs, wages paid for by our residents. That adds nothing to our economy. And 20 years ago, when my wife and I moved here, we saw Bluffton as a tourist town that was trying to become more of a tourist town. And as you advance 2 decades, you find that we've been successful. We are more indebted and more addicted to tourist dollars today. We're the same, but only bigger. We've built up more grocery stores, more restaurants, more gas stations, but we haven't done one thing to diversify our economy or provide for opportunities for job, career advancement for our residents. We have a big problem in that regard. And I don't believe that our comp plan adequately addresses this. In my opinion, the chapter on economic development is the most important thing in this comp plan. It should be on page 1, not 115. And I sincerely hope that you commissioners hear what I'm saying and implore staff to take a much deeper dive on this chapter on economic development and find out why our leadership refuses to get serious about recruiting good companies here to Bluffton to diversify our local economy and provide job opportunities and real careers and high-paying wages for our residents. So thank you for giving me a few minutes, and thank you all for your service.
Thank you for your service. For the newer commissioners, just to know, Mr. Raymond was a town councilman for years, and he also serves on the board of the fire department, fire district.
All right, any others?
Carmen Manning.
Good evening. My name is Carmen Avon Manning, and I live at 111 Quarter Casting Circle in Bluffton. I did send good evening to everybody, and thank you, everybody, for donating your time. I sent a long list of items to Charlotte Moore earlier this week, and that was after my first read-through the draft plan. So I have those questions, and then in addition to that, in particular, the recommendation F.11 says we're going to eliminate all septic tanks. And I was kind of shocked by the strong language because a properly designed and functioning septic tank is great. And I understand the issue with bacteria and the loading to the May River, but to make such a broad statement, I think that needs to be carefully worded. Second, there was no mention, you talk about LEEDs and LEEDs programs, but nowhere in the report is anything about the EPA's Green Streets. And that's a very good program. In fact, I understand we're going to be doing some rework on Calhoun Street, and there's perfect opportunity to use pervious pavement. Unfortunately, we already rebuilt those parks. There's no pervious pavement. And just so you know, it's not that new. I just left my daughter's place in Columbus. Every parking lot is pervious pavement. So we should really start using it here. Lastly, and this one's hard to put into words, but I guess my pet peeve around here, I love Bluffton, I love the fact that we moved here, but every time I go to Buckwalter Place, I cringe. And I stood on the corner where Tito's is, and I looked up, and there's a yellow and white facade, brown brick, red brick, gray, white. And all the places I go are nice communities, nice little shopping centers, cute little shops, a place where you can get a cup of coffee, get an ice cream. You could walk around on a path. And Buckwalter Place is just like a group of kindergartners with Legos. And let's squeeze things in. They don't have to match, just as long as we occupy every square foot. And I did look at the park. You know, so I go through a couple of times a week. Every time I go by, I look at that park and I say, is anybody in there? And I actually saw somebody in there, a woman with 2 kids. And I went up to her and I said, oh, it's nice to see somebody using the park. And she said, I'm only here because my father's getting getting treatment over at Chandler. And I have the 2 kids with me. She said, how could you walk here? She said, I have a carriage, I have the kid. I couldn't walk here. She said, as it was, I had to park over by Kroger. So I would just ask you to use that when you're approving these plans.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Do we have any old business? All right, we will move on to new business. The Bluffton Assemblage street naming application. A request by John Giordano of Thomas and Hutton on behalf of the Development Associates for approval of the street naming application. Joe?
Thank you. This is a street naming application for Bluffton Assemblage. The request is a request by John Giordano of Thomas and Hutton on behalf of Development Associates, Inc. for approval of the street naming application. The applicant's requesting approval of the following street names to be used for the proposed 47 senior living cottages and 40,000 square foot.
That's the wrong description.
Certainly is.
Did we change it?
Did not. I apologize.
I pulled the wrong report.
In the meantime, John, can you say your last name?
Giordano.
Giordano.
Thank you, I'm sorry. I can never do it. I'll have to ask you every single
I have
time.
it under presentation. That's going to be the only thing wrong. So jump back on. Yep, I'm sorry. The request is a request by John Giordano of Thomas and Hutton on behalf of Development Associates for approval of street naming. The applicant's requesting approval of the following street names to be used for future development of Bluffton Assemblage. Subject property is zoned residential general and consists of 24.8 acres identified by tax map numbers. Well, I'll skip the tax map numbers. It's on Buck Island Road and Ballfield Road. Apologize, let me jump back to here. The applicant is proposing to construct 85 single-family residential lots per comments. At the May 25, 22 meeting of the DRC, street names are required to provide addresses for proposed buildings. The street naming application was reviewed at the May 25, 22 DRC committee with 4 of the 9 proposed street names approved for use by the town of Bluffton, the town of Hilton Head, and Beaufort County. Planning Commission actions are as granted by the powers and duties set forth in section 226C5 of the UDO. Planning Commission has the authority to take the following actions: approve the application as submitted by the applicant, approve the application with conditions, or deny the application as submitted by the applicant. These are the total of 10 criteria that are looked at for street naming application. Finding from staff is staff finds that the proposed new street names are acceptable and meet the requirements of Article 3 of the UDO as stated above. And the staff recommendation is that staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve the following new street names as submitted by the applicant. And that would be Lockwood Drive, Sawyer Street, Peyton Place, and Parkview Road.
John, do you want to say anything to that? You good? Okay. Can I entertain a motion? Or anyone need to talk about anything?
I just want to, just one thing. Dan, first of all, thank you for, since the last time the commission has reviewed this, last time we got names and there was some concern about some of the names, but we didn't have any alternatives. This one, they had 9 names, and you had a number of them that were acceptable. That very first page that you showed the staff report, it accepted all of the names that were submitted, yet there's an Amberley Lane versus an Amberley Drive. There's a Cooper's Court compared to the Cooper's Cut. So I'm glad you got more. I still am struggling with how did it first get approved? I know you can't answer that. It's a whole bunch of people that do it. I'm glad that you guys are getting more names than we actually need so that we can have some flexibility. So thank you.
That's right. We're recommending they provide 3 street names per street that they want to name. So.
Thank you.
Anybody else? A motion?
Make a motion to approve.
All right.
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion?
Wait, I do want to
Okay.
comment that. Are you approving it as staff recommends?
As
or
staff recommended.
do we need to amend the motion to say that rather than approve? Because I think if we just say approve, does that not mean all of the roads would be approved?
Richardson?
Thank you, Commissioner Duncan. And again, just for the record, as I do most planning commission meetings, my name is Richardson Bruce here. For the town of Bluffton, I think that was kind of implied in Commissioner Flynn's statement, but if you just want to omit it for the record, that's perfectly fine as well. The applicant's here, staff is here, and we can make sure that it's incorporated in the minutes. So whatever y'all want to do.
I make a motion to amend the motion to include per staff recommendation.
That's right. We'll need a second on that.
So, yeah, do we have a second on that?
Should I second it again?
You can second that.
Second.
Any other
in favor?
discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then
Now we need to approve the original.
Yes, ma'am.
Do I have a motion to approve the original?
We already have that.
Okay, so I need a,
Yeah, we just need
the,
we need a vote on the,
so I don't need a,
you don't need a new motion.
then I
just a
need
vote.
a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. Okay. The next thing, this will be with Dan as well. May River Montessori Preliminary Development Plan. Ward Edwards is the applicant, and they're requesting approval of a preliminary development plan for the, to construct a new classroom building on the same campus, or adjacent to.
Madam Chairman, this is a preliminary development plan for May River Montessori.
It paused somehow.
Applicant requested Ward Edwards Engineering on behalf of the property owner, May River Montessori, Inc., is requesting approval of a preliminary development plan. Project proposes the construction of a new classroom building located at 58 Calhoun Street, adjacent to the May River Montessori's existing main facility. This application is for preliminary development plan located within the Neighborhood Center HD zoning district and is subject to the standards set forth in the town of Bluffton UDO. Subject parcel is located between Bridge Street and Lawrence Road with access to the parcel from Calhoun Street. The project consists of one two-story classroom building totaling 5,689 square feet and containing 4 classroom office type spaces on each floor for a total of 8 classroom office type spaces. Staff comments on preliminary development plan were reviewed at the May 11, 2022 meeting of the DRC. The applicant provided a response to comments and updated exhibits to address the comments provided. Due to the project being within the historic district, the plan will be required to go through the certificate of appropriateness process. This is an aerial showing the project location. A little bit closer up, fronting on Calhoun Street between Lawrence and Bridge Street. This is the site layout. If you guys need a closer zoomed in version of this, I have one as a later slide that we can bring up. This is the landscape plan submitted. The building is sitting on the front addressing Calhoun Street. There is a bridge here that will provide pedestrian access to the main facility that's to the south. Planning Commission shall consider the criteria set forth in section 310.3A of the UDO in assessing an application for a preliminary development plan. The applicable criteria are provided below followed by staff findings. These are the 6 criteria. Planning Commission has the authority to take the following action: approve the application as submitted by the applicant, approve the application with conditions, table the application, or deny the application as submitted by the applicant. In the staff recommendations, town staff finds that with the conditions noted below, the requirements of section 310.3A of the UDO will be met and recommends that the Planning Commission approve the application with the following conditions met prior to final development plan approval. One is, as the site is located within the Neighborhood Center HD zoning district, a certificate of appropriateness HD must be approved prior to issuance of building permits for the structure, and that's UDO section 3.18. 2, per section 537A1 of the UDO, provide large canopy street trees planted no greater than 50 feet apart along the Calhoun Street frontage. 3, per section 537E of the UDO, provide a foundation planting area at least 8 feet wide around all structures. 4, as a school, if the applicant proposes a civic building, the structure will need to be reflective of the requirements for the civic building type. And this is in sections 515.5 and 515.8N of the UDO. And the final staff recommendation is, condition is per section 515.7C1 of the UDO, provide a parking plan that shows the entire May River Montessori school site and all associated parking as described in the project narrative. We went out on site and verified that the 35 spaces that are referenced in the project narrative are located there as described in the project narrative. The suggested motion is Planning Commission approves the application with the conditions noted by staff.
Okay. Connor, do you want to speak to the application?
Good evening, y'all. Connor Blaney with Ward Edwards Engineering. Thank you all, and Dan, thank you for the presentation and introduction. As you mentioned, it's an existing establishment, and the adjacent parcel, it has an artificial turf grass area, and the kids use that for playing.
Pardon me, Madam Chair, if the applicant would be so kind as to speak in the microphone, just so folks that might be watching online can hear. Yep.
Again, for the record, the name is Connor Blaney with Ward Edwards Engineering.
Does the microphone lift up a little bit or no?
You can adjust it.
So you don't have to bend over as much.
Thank you. Just want to reiterate that it's an existing establishment. May River Montessori, the existing school, uses the adjacent parcel for outdoor play space for the kids. There are a number of significant large trees on site, which resulted in the proposed building location closer to Calhoun Street in an effort to preserve those trees. A couple of the conditions I do want to hopefully speak a little bit or elaborate on, one of which was requiring a large canopy tree every 50 foot along Calhoun Street. With the building's location, there's limited space directly in front of the building, and with some of the Calhoun streetscape efforts, I know that the overhead power is, I think, intended to be underground, which would be in conflict with a canopy tree there. May I suggest that the canopy trees be located on either end of the building, which would be over 50 feet, though.
Okay.
How long is that building? Seems you said it's over 50 feet.
It is over 50 feet. Roughly 70 feet, but not exact.
May I? Connor, one of the questions I was asking staff, and it wasn't really clear to me, I haven't seen the school during normal times and people dropping off and picking up their kids. I don't know how crowded it gets, and I don't know how many more students roughly we're adding. I think it says 4 class/office per floor, so 8 class or offices. Is it 8 classrooms that we're adding? And roughly, is it 20 kids per class? Do you have any idea?
It's a great question. I don't have all the answers for you, unfortunately. I believe a lot of it's flexible space to help the existing school as they are currently at capacity. I'm not sure how much additional capacity, if any of this will add, but additional classroom space. As part of the structure, I know that the May River Montessori is planning on adding 2 instructors to help with the additional building.
Can I piggyback on that, Rich?
Please.
Okay. First of all, a couple questions that hopefully somebody has the answer to. How many classrooms are there now?
I don't have that
How
off.
many students are there now?
Don't have that often.
Okay, a quick quick Google search of, which everybody knows Google and the internet is perfect, says that a Montessori classroom has between 28 and 35 students. Okay? If we're putting, let's call it 6 classrooms in there and 2 offices. Let's take 30 as an average. That's 3 times 6, that's an extra 180 students that we're adding to it. And to piggyback on where I think Rich was going, you've got, let's say each car that shows up has 2 students per car. You've got an additional 90 cars coming there for drop-off and pickup every day. And I have seen that traffic pattern. And you have cars pegged all the way down Green Street and all the way down Calhoun Street to the river, and it creates a traffic nightmare.
Bridge Street.
And Bridge Street. And you have to, if you are not part of the school traffic and you try to get through, you have to go the other way down the street in order to get through that area now. And this additional classroom space, it's a major concern to me on traffic flow, traffic impact. There are other issues too, but that is my major issue, is we're adding a lot of students here. The other issue related to it is, this is a separate lot, correct, from the others?
It is a separate parcel, but the same owner.
I don't know if staff has had a chance to look at that, but I don't think we can let them put parking spaces on a different lot.
We have a shared parking agreement.
Well, here's my concern. Let's play devil's advocate. Worst case scenario, something happens where May River Montessori decides they're going to move out of town and they're going to sell these lots in the future. One of these lots doesn't have parking spaces on it.
It's a shared parking agreement, so it would always.
It would always
within
stay
there,
with it?
mhm,
Okay,
Stay with it.
okay.
Correct.
I'll defer a little bit to staff there on that one, but generally that's the way that the UDO is written, that if you're going to have your parking on another lot, it needs to be either through a shared parking easement agreement, or if it's the same owner, there are flexible ownership structures that you can do through,
But it transfers with any sale.
With the property.
That's the, yes, sir.
Yeah.
My understanding is based on the UDO that only 40% is allowed to be shared parking with an adjacent
The
parcel.
40% is when you have different uses that are kind of merged together. And since this is the same property owner,
Same use.
But it's currently the same property owner, but in the future, hypothetically speaking, May River Montessori sells it off to 2 different owners, then it's,
They'd
which
have to
could have potentially
readjust.
2 different uses.
They'd have to add to that. So like if a restaurant went there, they'd have to figure out how to park it all on their lot.
yeah. So then they would be coming back in. with
They would be coming back
development
to us. Like if the use changes and it changes some of the parking significantly, it would have to come back to us.
Commissioner Duncan, if I may, or Commissioner Wetmore, just to try to understand the questions that y'all are asking and maybe put them in for the people who are, again, watching or in the audience tonight. So I guess the concern is you have these 2 lots in, say, May River Montessori, the main structure that we all know about that's in what I'll just call the Lot A. If it is expanded in consideration of parking that's going to be located on Lot B is sold, now you have essentially a non-conforming Lot A, and you won't have parking for that one. Is that the concern?
That was my concern, but it was alleviated with what Amanda said, the
So-
shared parking agreement.
So the shared parking easement agreement is designed to do that. There are some, there's some things that we can work out just to try to alleviate that as well when it's the same owner. Shared parking easement agreements are typically done when they're not the same owner, because you don't necessarily have easements between the same owner. So there are things that we can do to try to alleviate that and make sure that it remains tied for parking purposes to the other development.
Going back to the first question, numbers of students and numbers of cars, is there anything that within our purview that we can get some information about that? Or is that something,
I'm not prepared to make a decision in the positive until we get some of the data myself. That's each of our decisions.
yeah, and I'm asking staff, is there any other way to clarify this is there space for us to be poking on this, essentially?
I believe so, just from, the review criteria standpoint of it, and we can pull those up here in a second, but, the traffic circulation, I know that's obviously an issue. A clarification, because I just heard that there are 2 new employees that are being added, and I'm not sure if that was calculated into that total parking count.
That's what I was going to say, and part of y'all's requirements would be to give a physical, view of all the parking spaces, on one map. So we could see where the whole, as a whole complex.
And the 2 employees is a little bit of a discontinuity for me, because if we're adding 8 rooms, we're adding 2 instructors. So are they really overstaffed existing that are going to spread over there? It doesn't make a lot of sense how that works.
If I may, so parking, the 2 additional instructors were counted when we counted the existing parking, both existing instructors and the additional 2 proposed new instructors to be added. Per the UDO, we analyzed it per instructors. I'd be happy to get in touch with Mayor Montessori and have some more exact numbers on number of existing classrooms and students. I know that the intention of this was to gain more space, not necessarily more students. But unfortunately, I don't have exact answers on that. But that,
Maybe-
again, was the intention behind the proposed building.
Yeah, ask them what their capacity is or what their cutoff limit is.
Yeah, and it's kind of a stretch sitting up here to hear a building that's going to be 6,000 square feet with 8 rooms and 2 employees. So I think
Now,
clarification on what's there now, how many teachers are there now, what the plan is, will help us tremendously in figuring this out.
Now, the 2 additional employees aren't just 2 employees for that building. It's 2 additional employees in addition to their current staff to be spread across both buildings. Their current staffing is 30. Thank you, Dan. And so the total staff between the 2 buildings after the proposed building is to be 32.
What's the distance to the nearest handicapped parking space from the entrance?
I don't have that offhand. I believe the drop-off and front entrance of the main facility will still remain where the kids are dropped off and where that handicap serves.
Just in excess of 150 feet, correct?
From the existing
From
building,
the existing handicap parking space to the proposed entrance on this building?
I don't have that distance now.
And is it handicap accessible from that handicap spot to this building?
I'd have to further analyze the existing site. All proposed paving that we are doing on this plan would be ADA accessible.
And
I
this
would
is
have
just
to
a
look at-
preliminary plan, so they'll have all that in the future.
Correct.
I'd have to analyze the connection back off the property to answer specifically going to the adjacent property, though.
I'm going to try and direct us a little bit. As far as, if we can look at the recommendations, we know that number 1, the certificate of appropriateness is for the architecture for the historic district, so we know that they can't go forward if that's not approved either. That's a condition of another approval. And then he explained the Canopy street trees. What are people's thoughts or feelings as far as his justification with the 2 trees on either end? Does anyone have any thoughts on that, or are they okay with his suggestion?
I'm having a hard time thinking about that until I get the clarification on, is this a main street or is this a civic? Because that affects the square footage and the setback, doesn't it?
Yep.
So
That's
how do
item
I-
number 4.
Yeah, maybe I'm jumping ahead. It's almost like hard to answer that tree question until I've answered that question.
I got it. And that's, the foundation plan, it all kind of goes together. So do you know if this is truly a civic building, or because You just want to know the, I know there was some conflicting information somewhere.
It's my understanding that this is being proposed as a civic building, but the architect is going to lead that and address that as part of HPC.
He has to get to HPC. Commissioners, my thought process on this, and look, I've got friends that are over May River Montessori. I love the school. I don't think this is to a point where we can make a decision on it.
We need more information.
If we table it, and I'm looking at you now, if we table it, we control what happens to it and whether we ever pull it off the table. Now, most likely we will. If you withdraw it and come back to us, you have more control over the process. Can't tell you what to do, just talking about options.
Madam Chairman, if I may, if you do so choose to table it, please provide some direction as to what specific items you're asking staff to work with the applicant to address. It doesn't necessarily mean that it'll be back at the next meeting, just because it might take time to get all this information compiled. But
Guidance.
we need to get the information together first and then, be able to get it back on the agenda to you. So just ask that you be specific in what you are looking for us to work with the applicant on.
Does everyone or someone object to information? Do we have enough information? Do we not? Lydia, what do you think?
I don't think we have enough information to review it today.
I don't think so either. I think you need more.
Carly? Okay, so, go ahead.
I would like to withdraw the application.
Okay, so now what do we think?
So if the applicant has withdrawn the application, then there's nothing for the commission to consider.
Okay.
So you can't take action on the application since it has been withdrawn. Again, moving forward, I think it is important that we have the applicant here. The applicant obviously is here on behalf of the property owner, on behalf of May River Montessori. He's with the engineering firm Ward Edwards. And I think it's important that y'all provide some feedback to Ward Edwards so that they can advise May River Montessori accordingly. In particular, it does sound like item number 4 about the disconnect between whether this is being proposed on the preliminary development plan side as a civic building, but is on the HPC COFA. It is going forward, it looks more like a Main Street building type. And that's something that has to be resolved, or else
That's a number 1 item.
you're going to have some issues in the future after all the architectural renderings are paid for and all the expense of that process is gone through. So obviously, there's no application pending at the moment, but
I think
we
we
have to
could,
move on to the next item, so I think it'd be worthwhile.
I think we could give direction for a minute right now.
Absolutely.
Some of our concerns that might help.
Okay, did you want to go ahead and do that, start that?
Thanks. The main, I think the applicant already knows, my main concern is traffic flow. I hesitate to use this, but it's like we have a Chick-fil-A in that part of Old Town. Okay? Traffic flow, how many more students, how many students are there currently, so we get a feel for it. Staff, that'll help us to have a comfort level with being able to move forward with it.
Understood.
And specifically, I would love to know, what are we talking about for existing students, proposed students? And if the school is bound and determined to do this, how would they manage the traffic flow? They can manage it by different start and stop times if they so choose. So I would like a little bit more information, like Charlie has said. The other thing I'd like, there's been so much focus on trees. I'm not just jumping at, 70 or 80 feet's good. So I'd really like you to look hard when you decide the Civic versus Main Street. I really like the idea of having the trees on the street or replanting them. So it's, again, I wouldn't say that's a bomb, but I'd really like to have you look at that harder.
Okay, absolutely.
I don't know if there has been an arborist report or if there's a plan to have an arborist report, but I think it would be helpful to have that information as you're evaluating which building type that you would like to use. I know a lot of the application and narrative was about preserving the existing live oaks, but it appears that this is a two-story building that encroaches quite a bit into the drip line of several of the trees. So I think as we're evaluating street trees, existing trees, and the building type footprint and setbacks, it would be helpful to understand the condition of those, the limb structure, and any foundation or construction recommendations for those as well.
I'm all set as far as, I agree with Rich on that. I think that,
I would just reiterate, provide that parking plan as it pertains to the entire site, and be sure to address the accessible parking and walkway to the entrance within the appropriate feet that it has to be. There was another comment I wanted to make. One of the, Mr. Commissioner Whitmer's comment regarding the traffic, the UDO does outline on that development plan that the roads need to be able to support the development. And so I don't think it currently is supporting the development well. So they've already got a pre-existing issue that they're causing. So they should be looking to resolve that through this process. And like you said, I think that it's not necessarily in infrastructure, it can be in programming and in terms of how that's dealt with. And it may need to be an agreement that's drafted so that it can't be changed at a later date, or that would have to come back to be reviewed at a later date potentially. Just so that there's a lot of business owners, Calhoun Street's going through a major renovation, and I don't want this to become a problem for our old town as it continues to expand, so.
Hold on, Kathleen Richardson. Is that something, did you hear some of what Kathleen said as far as like the programming of how the school lets in, out, whatever? Is that something that we can, is that part of our purview to like say that needs to be incorporated in the development plan?
The actual timing of school,
It's something I'd have to look into, to be honest. I'm trying to think of an argument that we can make to justify that. Obviously, the traffic concerns and the traffic patterns and safety, but you also want to make sure that the applicant can control their own decision-making and their hours and what works for their staff and what works for their students. And trying to avoid too much regulatory oversight on our end. Let me think on that, because it's going to be a kind of complex balancing of interest. Mr. Iker brought up he wants a question of clarification, because I think there may be some uncertainty as to what I interpreted as a withdrawal versus what Mr. Iker interpreted as a withdrawal, and maybe this is something that needs to be discussed further, but is the application being completely withdrawn so that y'all are going to submit a new application, or are you withdrawing it just from consideration for tonight and want to continue forward with the application as originally submitted?
I would like to provide additional documentation to hopefully address and alleviate the concerns brought forth.
If he withdrew it completely, then he'd have to start all over.
You have to start over from scratch, which
We don't want to do that.
it's just the terminology used. We just want to make sure.
So what do we call it? Withdrawal with
The
what?
same application with additional supporting documentation.
Which is
We
perfect.
heard it at a later date.
yes, and staff is completely fine with that. Just wanted to make sure that it was clear on all parties.
I have one more question, and this pertains kind of the relationship of the architecture to the street, and I think you said it will go through COFA before it's approved. Will that look at, here's the genesis of my thought process of why I'm concerned, and perhaps then you can speak to how COFA might be able to address this. With the 3 buildings that just went up over at the old eccentricity site, which I think is 70 Calhoun. 71 Calhoun. It's become a very unpopular, it's been a sore subject for a lot of people about that development pattern on Calhoun Street. Calhoun Street typically it was always developed with larger buildings set back from the street, smaller buildings at the street, typically more closer to the corners. So this being potentially a civic building, a large building of great prominence, potentially 2 stories, right up on the street, I can see potential for a response from the community saying this is not what we want on Calhoun Street. Respectfully, I do absolutely understand the placement of its proximity to the street, given that the existing large live specimen oaks that are in the back. I think there's possibly a way to still shift the building back there, but obviously that's, if you meet setback requirements, you do. But is there a way that COFA can address potentially kind of this, maybe the second floor, it doesn't go straight up and it's not 2 stories up straight from the sidewalk? Is that part of their purview process? Do they have any kind of say-so and teeth as in terms of how that relationship is done toward the street?
So the issue is that you, as a planning commission, you're setting the tone as to how the site will be developed. And the concerns are the fact that on their conceptual certificate of appropriateness that they submitted back in November, they came through as showing that they were a Main Street building type. So in that zoning district, you have a maximum square footprint of 2,500 square feet. Their plans proposed over 2,900 square feet, so their building was too big. Even if they were classified as an additional building type, as you guys remember, we did a UDO edit to restrict the overall maximum square footage that's allowed for the largest building type that's allowed in that zoning district, which reverts back to the Main Street, which is the 2,500 square feet. So that's the conflicting information we have. We've got a COFA that's saying a Main Street building type. We've got a civic building that's being proposed through the development plan. So they need to mesh together to make sure that they're consistent with what's being developed. When you do the civic building, then you're going into a more grandiose type of building, larger features. Typically, buildings are pushed back, more prominent, higher buildings, not what is being proposed through their certificate of appropriateness right now. So that's the issue that we have, is that the engineering side and the architecture side need to work together to make sure that they're consistent. If they do decide to move forward with a Main Street building, then they need to reduce the size of the building that they're being proposed right now. And you cannot...
You can't have it both ways.
Can't have it both ways. Exactly. So if they're going to do the Main Street, reduce it, bring it back, show it as Main Street, move forward with the COFA as Main Street based off of the development plan that's being approved at the preliminary.
But even in that process, they rectify all of that, whether it's civic building, it could, and yes, that then would shift it further back. But if it stays as a Main Street building and it stays where it is, even if it shrinks in size, they don't have to push it back further from the street. And that doesn't necessarily shrink the height of it.
They have to meet the design standards in Chapter 5 so that each building type has its own setback regulations and its building height regulations. It's just with civic, and Main Street building, there's specific features that they have to have. So like to your point, is if it's a civic building and it's grandiose, but we're trying to save the trees, those two things don't mesh necessarily to me. But if he's showing civic, they have to show civic. And so then when they show civic to HPC, HPC might say, that's just not in scale and keeping with the context of Calhoun Street. So they have that purview. We're just looking at the overall land part of it, but they will look at the vertical.
But does
to make sure it meets these conditions and make sure it meets the intent of the district.
Okay.
So they may say the civic doesn't meet the intent. I mean, I don't know what they're going to say.
But the Main Street building type would still allow it to go 2 stories up straight, right where it's shown on the plan in terms of its proximity to the
like
street.
what Kevin said is like we're setting the tone. So if we say, no matter what, we're concerned trees are a big priority, then that's setting a tone saying, okay, hopefully they are thinking about height and what that does to those trees. If, they're going to have to provide an arborist report, or if they provide an arborist report, that'll probably should give them clues as to the architecture of the building when they're reviewing it. They can't, I guess, you can't beforehand, before they submit it, say, no, you can't do that. You have to,
I feel like what I'm asking isn't, what the response is not what I'm looking for. I think you're catching that what I'm asking is, it can go 2 stories up right where it's shown,
Yes.
regardless of the building type. And basically,
It depends on the building type that's being proposed, so, which.
right, if it's a Main Street building, it can go 2 stories up right where it's at. Which means it can look a lot like, in the relationship to the street, what those other 3 buildings are doing in relationship to the
Not
street.
necessarily, in the sense that those buildings were much larger. They had a 3,500 square foot footprint, and were taller, eventually were reduced down in some of the height. But this one is, when we closed that loophole, so now only buildings can have a 2,500 square foot footprint. So the size is going to be, it's going to be smaller by 1,000 square feet of the footprint.
What's the length of that building, the eccentricity build, 71 Calhoun Street, what is the length of one of those buildings? And
90,
just one of those, or the whole, or both?
I think it's 90 feet from what I'm trying to remember. But, I mean,
And this is 70. So it's already going to be smaller
yes.
than what that
And
is.
it needs to be reduced down even more than if they decide to move forward with that Main Street building type.
Kathleen, if you read the chart with the building types, so the Main Street building by right is 2 to 2.5 stories, right? And the Civic is 2 stories. But in Civic, if you read the definition, like he was saying, it's more grandiose, so it's probably going to be pretty big. Bigger than a 2.5 story, you know what I mean? So no matter what, there's going to be I don't know what they're proposing, but the HPC, if they see something large that's in the tree canopy that they don't agree with, it's going to be a detriment to the tree, they can push back on that and say, hey, maybe you need to scale this down or step it down or watch the massing or something, but they can't say.
In relationship to the existing tree canopy, not to a proposed not to the street.
To the existing.
Right. I'm worried, my concern is the relationship of this building to the street.
Well, according to the UDO, like you can only, they give you the rules of what the relationship to the street are. So
Right.
if there was a reason, like there was a tree you're trying to save or go around or whatever, then you could go for a variance on those setbacks.
Right, I understand
That's a
that.
different process, but.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
but if there was something that was, a reason for not adhering to the setbacks, then you go for a variance.
The whole point of bringing this up was, I just don't want a repeat of what happened across the street.
I don't think
and
anyone does.
Yeah. And so that's why I'm bringing this up. That's why I'm asking if we've got legs and what legs, what means we have to address this. Because I'm very concerned about Calhoun Street and how it's developed and being developed.
And that's why we need clarification on what this building is, what the footprint is. That'll dictate the setbacks, that'll dictate the building type, and then we'll understand better. But right now,
Yes, I
we have
understand
none of that information.
I understand. I get all, yeah.
Yep. Okay. Everybody else good? Is that all we need?
I believe so.
All right, so then thanks.
Y'all,
Thank
hope to
you.
see y'all soon.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So now the next item is for discussion. It is a workshop regarding the Blueprint Bluffton, an updated long-range comprehensive plan for the town of Bluffton. Kevin, you're going to intro that?
I am, and if you could just bear with me for 1 second, I'm going to pull up our consultant's information.
And Katie was here listening the whole time, so she knows exactly what to look out for. Right, you got it?
All right. Thank you, Madam Chairman. So we're here this evening for a workshop. Oh, hold on a second. I'm still stuck on. There we go. We're here for a workshop. It's actually a required workshop for the comprehensive plan. As most of you know, we've been going through this process since March, April last year. We've had various steering committees, stakeholder meetings. We've met with town council on various occasions. We actually had a workshop about 2 or 3 months ago with town council just to give them an update on kind of where we're going through on this process. So our consultant, Kyle May with MKSK, is here in the audience, right there on the other side of me. So he's going to kind of go through so kind of where we are right now on the draft comprehensive plan. So first opportunity to provide some comments, feedbacks. I would ask, and we've already talked to everyone, we are going to propose a special meeting on July 13th. This will give another opportunity for anyone who is finding out about this after the fact, after this meeting, that they still can attend, can still provide comments to it. And then our goal tonight is to kind of focus on some of the higher level items. So if there's I would like for this picture to be changed to this. Let's save those for if you could provide that information to us on a just kind of like on
An email.
in a separate email. Yeah, that'd be wonderful. Or if you notice some grammatical errors that we haven't caught, please let's try not to focus on those items this evening. Let's stick with our goals, objectives, and how we're going to get there. So our action items. So I guess with that, I'm going to pass it on to Kyle, and this is supposed to be an open discussion. I'm going to let him kind of take over, and then all of us are going to be taking notes going through this process, so that way, if you do have issues, we're going to be able to help him to get these corrected, okay?
Thank you, Kevin. That was a nice 15 seconds.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate this opportunity. As Kevin introduced, my name is Kyle May. I'm a senior associate with MKSK. We've had the privilege here over the last year plus to help facilitate this process, develop a new comprehensive plan for this community. It's a very important opportunity for us, I think, to have this audience this evening. We're really excited to initiate this conversation with you all. It takes a long time to develop an object in a process like this. There's a lot of conversations that we have worked through, 700 plus community members that we've spoken with, a number of stakeholders that have been involved, and of course our steering committee, and last and certainly not least, our staff and their involvement as well. And just want to say thank you to all those parties that have been a participant in this work thus far, this ongoing work thus far. This has been a tremendous opportunity for me and for our team to really get to know better the town of Bluffton on the way in. It's not lost on me, the little postcard outside that said it's a great place to live. It truly is. I think you all know that. Hence the consideration and development, hence the consideration of every decision that is made here, big, small, or otherwise. There's a real feel for that, and you all do a tremendous job and are to be commended for that. As I mentioned, this is a long process without the disrupt, that we've all gone through over the last last 24 months with the COVID. It's thrown us an additional curveball here when it comes especially to community engagement. We've worked really hard throughout this process to be creative, to be committed to involving those voices in the work. It's not easy right now, whether you're in Bluffton or whether you're in other parts of the country, to do that aspect, but we've worked really hard to bring those folks in. We've relied heavily on staff and on stakeholders and on people just like you to help us tailor this work. So I want to thank those folks that have been involved. As you all know that have been involved in processes like this, commissioners, as this role or as a different role, this is an opportunity in a community like yours to ask some big questions, right? South Carolina and Georgia and some of the other states around here are quite unique in the sense that the state asks you to do this regularly. Other parts of the country, that's not the case. But we think it's a great habit to get into as a community, and not just because we do the work, but because you know the kind of results it can truly leverage as you think about what do 10 years mean here of growth and development. My agenda for today is quite simple. I wanted to quickly run through how we got here and really open up some conversation. As Kevin mentioned, smaller comments, happy to take and collect in whatever form you want to bring those to us, Commissioner. Whether it's email, it's phone call, what have you, we are absolutely open, I think, at this moment to take what you've got. I'd like to open discussion today and focus on some higher order things. I can talk to you a little bit about structure, how we arrived at where we are. Talk to you a little bit about thrust and where we push hard, other areas in the chapters where we've landed in different places. Wanted to bring through that. But all really in the service of beginning a new conversation here, this time, as I mentioned, around an object. So we work hard to define something, in this process, and then along with you, true experts in the community, seek to refine that work. So again, very excited to do that. I'm not going to belabor this. I've got some slides here, really, I think more for the record. Commissioners, you are well aware of how these processes work. I did just want to point out our general arc and timeline, time frame. From task 1 to task 6, truly we should be straddling 5 and 6 at this moment because we are in the process of refining this document, leading toward, as we hope, an eventual adoption. You all know why we plan, because great communities plan. You're a great community. It's an act of stewardship. It's an act of visioning. It's an act of involving your community in the most critical discussion, which is where are we going to be in the future. You also know, and again, this is for the broader record for those that are tuning in, you have some required elements that are part of your planning process here in the state of South Carolina. And you'll see those reflected in the organization that we have. Also some strategic focus areas that have emerged from the work that was part of our community engagement process. You're growing. I won't belabor any of these facts. And town growth, of course, physical growth goes along with that as I press the wrong button. Apologies. I did just want to stop here and flash the various inputs into this work. It would be a poor product if it were just my opinions and thoughts that went into something like this, God forbid, or just our teams, or even just our teams and staff. And we really worked hard throughout this process to make sure that they were truly multiple streams running into this river. And eventually into this draft that you see before you today. So whether that's stakeholders, whether that's tornadoes causing us to have community workshops over video, or through some of our engagement that we had in person and online as well, lots of different forms and themes that came up throughout the work, which I hope you see reflected in some form throughout this. Obviously, I won't go through each of these in great detail, but some quick highlights. Housing is a critical concern among your community. What does that look like over our planning horizon? Lots of references and talk about, what is the green aspects of your community. I think you know that quite well. That interaction between the built environment and the natural environment really makes up the DNA of this place, and we're excited to hear that. And of course, as I wanted to quickly thank Ms. Manning and Mr. Raymond for their comments earlier. Mr. Raymond hit the nail quite on the head there. We talk about economic development and opportunities. And Ms. Manning, I appreciated the comments around resiliency and also the natural environment, which were so important to us. We arrange our work here, and when I say we, I mean our staff, steering committee, and the planning team, going from broad to specific. We think about the goals that inform each of these topic areas. We think about measurable objectives that support those as pillars. And lastly, in this work, we try very hard to get at some point to a project or policy that begins to support this work in an ongoing way. That bottom piece, though, as you all know, having done this work, from your point right now, or maybe in the past, that this is the piece that requires the most interpretation and work over time. The best comprehensive plans that we see around the country set that broad direction and say it very loudly. This is where we're headed. They support that with goals that we decide as a measurable strategy, measurable outcomes expressed simply. But then as they work throughout the process, they experiment and they move along and they develop plans that work. And I'll leave you with the visual here about where we think we are at this moment of folding in the data, the input, the work that we've done as a team to technically analyze your community through GIS and other means with what we've heard through stakeholders in the community. Bringing those two tracks together, trying to represent those two pieces, the intuition and the technical reality and the data that supports that. That's where we think we are at the moment. But I truly look forward to your comments, and want to let you know that I told Charlotte and Kevin this, I want to be a sponge this evening. So whatever you have to offer, we want to consider that, take that in, organize that, and make these edits in a timely and absolutely reasonable way. So with that, I'll skip ahead to some of these comments and go straight into opening up some discussion. Kevin, Charlotte, is there anything else you'd like me to touch on? No?
You want us to go ahead and start? or
Absolutely,
you-
I apologize.
Okay.
Should have.
All right, Charlie, do you want to start with anything, or do you want him to? Would you like to start with anything?
Well, I mean, I guess the question is, did you want to give an overview of the whole thing, or do you want us to start in on some of our feedback?
Surely. What I could do, I think, very quickly, Commissioner, is speak just generally to, we've been calling this the wheel. Maybe it's the compass. I'm not sure the right way to refer to it. But our general organization of the document, which, say in this case, is literal to how the state works through it. There's no real hierarchy. I think the organization of the chapters, I would have mentioned that to Mr. Raymond had he not left. But what we tried to, within each of these, is present a consistent drumbeat or rhythm, one that introduces the highlights of the technical findings. We were coached throughout this process to create a document that is digestible, that's readable for average folks that live in this community, or folks that aspire to live in this community or invest in this community. So we really tried to, within each topic, hit on the highest points, the key facts. At that point, we wanted to get into, we call this thing an action agenda. There's a number of ways of discussing it, but a list of policies or indeed projects that help to support the overriding goal within each of those chapters. So whether it was economy and natural resources, there's a fairly consistent organization throughout. I'll say the one chapter, Commissioner, that is a bit of an outlier has to do with land use. And that is an area where you all know that you have some of the most control, over your community when it comes to zoning, when it comes to the processes that you're involved with, or indeed historic aspects as well. We spend some time there, think about the principles for future growth. We think about the future land use map. Of course, that's not a legal object, but it's a way of considering the movement of investment over time. So that chapter, a little bit different from the others, has a couple of objects, one of which is that future land use map has some consideration about categories for development. Again, not zoning districts, but a way of defining some of the development that's occurred naturally in this community that is truly treasured, and some of the development that could occur in this community that may be an amalgam of different types and forms that have popped up in different places and collected or applied, but it's aspirational in nature, and that is articulated in that particular chapter. One I would point out, though, of importance, I think, to this community in particular, and one that I want to thank the staff especially for their assistance on, has to do with cultural resources. You're a community of a lot of different peoples, a lot of different places. There's a lot of diversity here in this community, and through that cultural resources, the work of staff, and we try to organize, really trying to reflect all the assets that are here. How do those things celebrate? How are they lifted up? And frankly, how are they leveraged in this community today in an ongoing way? So that chapter is particularly heavy in the sense that those are some areas where you really have a lot of control as a town to lean in and to do work. So that's the broad overview, and I'll stop there and certainly take any questions or thoughts.
Madam Chairwoman, if I may, and Commissioner Wetmore, sorry to jump
I'm
in
used to
here.
it, Richardson.
You should be by now. One of the things I just wanted to bring up and just remind y'all, as you're going through this process, and this is just a workshop, you do have to do the resolution and the vote once you have a final product. But the South Carolina Code actually sets forth this requirement. It requires planning commissions, local planning commissions, to review this comprehensive plan every 5 years and create a new one every 10 years. And the language of the code is to ensure that the recommendations that y'all are making are an expression of a wise and efficient use of public funds, future growth, development, and redevelopment of the area of your jurisdiction, in consideration of the fiscal impact on the property owners. So all of these planning elements, when you're reviewing them, those are some of the key directions that you're supposed to be focusing on. Now, everything is unique to your jurisdiction, it's unique to the town of Bluffton, and it's painstakingly put out and filled out here. But I just wanted to remind y'all of that so you kind of have a good idea of what your overview is and what really should be some of the key focuses when you're going through this. So I will not speak for the rest of the meeting.
Well, I would like you to restate those key points, if you don't mind.
Already going back on my promise. The wise and efficient use of public funds, the future growth, development, and redevelopment of the area of your jurisdiction, in consideration of the fiscal impact on property owners. So this is supposed to be an expression of your opinions on what should happen to the town of Bluffton to meet with those three considerations in mind. And the elements that are shown on that compass are all part of those mandatory land planning elements that need to be incorporated within the comprehensive plan. So I'm here if y'all have any questions about this. Obviously, you have the consultant and staff here, and look forward to hearing your comments.
Richard, may I ask one more question too? Is there any statute that talks about deadline of when this needs to be complete? Or are we working against a deadline that we've imposed upon ourselves?
No, there are deadlines. So the deadline is a little bit, it's not clear that, if you have adopted it on September 1st, 2012, it has to be a new one by September 1st, 2022. But no, it's a 10-year planning process. But you need to adopt it because this is what governs all the other decisions. So when you make a planning decision, when you are approving the development plan or a UDO amendment, one of those criteria that you're always considering is this in conformity with your comprehensive plan? So if your comprehensive plan says, yeah, we want a lot of development in this particular area.
Let me clarify. Does this have to be done by us on July 27th to meet some specific deadline where town council has to approve it by, I'll make it up, November 1st?
I'm going to turn that over to staff because they have an idea better of what those timeframes are.
Okay, thank you.
From a legislative standpoint, no. From a contractual standpoint, yes.
Contractual,
Yes.
okay.
So we have a contract with MKSK, and that I believe was actually supposed to have been June, but it's been extended because of the various issues that we've had, dealing with COVID, dealing with tornadoes, all of these things. So from a contractual standpoint, they have to get us a product, and that we've got to get it through the process. So now, with that statement, I'd also like to say that Richardson said that, every 5 years you have to do an update by the code. That doesn't mean that we can't go back and make additional changes to this document at any time. So, I also want to keep that in mind. So if there are some minor issues that may need tweaking, we have every opportunity to work on that every month if we wanted to. I don't think that'd be a good use of our time. But, we can do that. So, I think the goal is if there are some issues that don't get resolved but can be acknowledged, that we know of, that we as staff can come back in and do minor edits to the document, we can do that. So, our goal is to get, obviously we have a contract, so we want to make sure that they provide the document, we pay them to do the work. And then if there's any other things that kind of come up, because it's a living document, so if things that come up that we need to address, we can do that. And on a staff level, we can do that.
So it would not have to go back to council for every change we make?
Well, yes, yeah, council still has to. So that's what I'm saying, we can work on over time, we can work on it from a planning commission standpoint of any changes that are necessary. And then we would collect all those together and then package it at one time to give to town council.
Thank you.
Well, Richardson, you took about half of what I was going to say. Thanks for that. No, I just want the rest of the commission to know this and to understand where I'm coming from when I'm about to say what I'm about to say. I had the pleasure of serving on town council in 2007 when we did the last full comprehensive plan. And as Richardson said, this is actually a critical document. It's a guiding document for everything we do. It sets forth what we have in the UDO. It sets forth and everything else. And everything else is checked against this document for accuracy, for intent. And it's kind of us deciding and handing off to council, who makes the ultimate decision where the town is headed. With that said, I've got, and staff I know is ready to make notes and you're ready to make notes. Do we have the document where we can scroll to certain pages? Because I can give page numbers and concerns and suggestions. What's the best way to do this?
You can certainly scroll to pages.
Okay.
Thank you.
Some of it was minutia, and that can be addressed at a different time. The first concern I have, and it's because it kind of sets the tone for things, on page 12, under planning context, in the second paragraph, it talks about, and it does throughout this document, it talks about Bluffton being 1 square mile prior to the late 1980s, and it mentions 1987, and it infers that the first annexation and growing from a mile was in 1987. It wasn't. It happened in 1998 is when the process started. I think the first annexation was in 99. It may seem like something little, but that's pretty much where the town started.
Absolutely.
And the map on page 13 that shows the 1987 through 2000, no, that's okay. That was a mistake on my part. There's a little confusion in my mind when we talk about the 10 state guidelines, the 10 chapters that we have to have per se, and the wheel has 9 items on it.
Yes,
And I get the intent, they're 9 items, and then here's the result of it, but there's a little confusion for people looking at that.
Get that note, Commissioner. Yeah, that, and just for clarification, the 10th item is the priority investments chapter, which is the final chapter, but you're correct, Commissioner, is not on the wheel.
Yeah, I don't know if it can be referenced as, the concept, I don't know if it can be referenced next to the wheel. I don't know if it should be. That's just something that confused me until I found it at the end.
Absolutely.
Page 18, under the section that says Old Town.
Yes.
18, sorry. I'm trying to make this as quick as
No,
possible.
I appreciate it. I'm trying to go quickly as well.
Scroll down to Old Town, if you would, on the right. That second point, there's a need to integrate Old Town with the rest of Bluff. What does that mean? Because Old Town is a unique identity that we love. And as somebody who lived in Old Town and now lives in, I guess you call it New Town, or not Old Town, that unique identity of Old Town is something we hold near and dear, and this sounds like the opposite.
No doubt, yeah.
So,
And you bringing this up on point, I believe that's poorly worded. I believe what stakeholders were saying, and that's what this is reflecting, the thoughts and themes from stakeholders that were interviewed throughout the process is the, yeah, oh, I'm sorry.
maybe appreciate a love for Old Town, or appreciate gain an understanding for Old Town,
Absolutely.
I don't,
If I could, I think, also with that, that was the perception of one of the individuals.
okay,
So what,
okay.
this is not necessarily
His fault.
We're not to the end of it. I got you. And if that's the case, that's the case. It just scared the out of
I
me.
understand.
We can go back and look through the information just to make sure it's clarified.
Okay,
Because this is opinions from those people.
Yeah.
okay. My bad on that.
Well, that raises an interesting question, if I may, Charlie. The common concerns of the publics was speed of development, traffic, and development standards. The common concerns, those are the top 3, of the steering committee, of which I was a part of, was land use, natural resources, and economy. How does that fit into this? Because the action plans don't reflect that by any stretch of the imagination. So, and again, as he's asking his questions, there's a larger question of like, does public comment or stakeholder input matter?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Because, well, when you look at the action plans, the 2 items with the most action plans by leaps and bounds, resiliency and culture. Neither one of those were mentioned by community or the stakeholders.
Rich, you're jumping to the last page, man.
Oh, well, no, I'm trying to talk an overarching thing.
And absolutely, if I could pause on that just for a moment, I think one of the constant battles that we have within developing a document like this is that battle that we have between what the town controls and what the town can really only influence. And one of the challenges that we had throughout this process, and you've heard from community members, listing of challenges that are not necessarily in the purview of the community, the town itself to address. For instance, congestion on roadways. For those roadways that we do control, which are very few for the town, yes, we have some ability to affect, invest, change, work. But in reality, a lot of that work is done at a higher order. It's done through being at tables, conference room tables, through the process of influence, through the process of leveraging relationships, working to ensure that, LARTP funding goes toward projects that work on behalf of Bluffton. And I believe you're right. Some of the weighting in here, you're going to see a lot more weighting toward issues, I believe, where the town has more control. And I think that was in process with the staff and with stakeholders of really having a list here that would work, that you could go do. That was one of the key priorities for leaders in this process. But can understand where there would be a disconnect there visually between A and then obviously B.
Well, this document, though.
Yes, sir.
To throw this into the mix, this document is our guiding document, whether it's something we can do or not. It still guides us to what we need to do in partnership with the county and the state and so on.
Absolutely.
But-
I want them to build on the same thing. It's sort of like, then there should be more action items of influence
Absolutely.
in those areas that we don't have control. At least that would be my simple way of looking at it.
That's truly fair. Yeah.
Okay, and I know we're going to camp on that at the end, Rich, too. But page 52 and 53. Specifically, the map on 53. Okay, you don't know this. You couldn't have known this. This is nothing that you would have run into unless you met somebody that lives in Alljoy. That study area that you have outlined includes just south of Brighton Beach and all the way to 278. Most of that is not in the town, including those little areas at Brighton Beach. Alljoy residents have a feeling that we are trying to annex them, and they have had that feeling for as long as the town of Bluffton has existed.
Yes, sir.
We are not. Including that area in the study area is not a wise thing to do, in my opinion.
Yes, sir.
So I think we need to pretty much cut the whole right peninsula off of that and probably adjust the population figures on 52 to match. But more importantly, it's just it'll make our life a little bit more difficult as we move forward, because people will start thinking we're going in that direction again.
Yes, sir.
Am I wrong?
I mean, I agree with that, your sentiment of their concern. From an understanding of the picture of what it is that the parts and pieces that are available to the town, the resources, the roads, the influence of those areas have on our town. I mean, those people, the people on Alljoy, not those people, the people of Alljoy are still very much, even if they aren't in town limits, a part of the town. They're part of the infrastructure. They work here, they play here, they are our friends. So respectfully, I'm not sure that from an analyzing perspective that I would not include them in that picture. I think perhaps it is a strong wording that is highlighted to say there is no intent to annex Alljoy. Its participation or its inclusion in here is only to help further fill the picture of the fingers of our relationship with the area
I
surrounding
hear you,
our town.
but we've done that before, and the result has been, don't care, you drew it that way, that's what you intend. You know, the result has always been, you're trying to trick us into this. And if we had some residents from there sitting here right now, they'd say the same thing. But anyways, those are my thoughts on that.
And I think to your point, their input on this, their voices being heard, saying that is important. And I think I want them saying, I don't want to be on this, I don't want to be on this, I don't want to be on this.
That's easy enough. We'll post on Nextdoor and Facebook, and I'll get you 100 of them in an hour. But anyways, 109.
Seriously, though, that needs to be looked into further.
And if I could remind everyone that South Carolina law prohibits the town from actively pursuing annexations. So, the intent is that a property owner first off would have to be contiguous with the town, and then they would have to come to us to request to be annexed into the town. So just want to make sure it's very clear that the town does not actively pursue annexations.
And we
So-
couldn't even if we wanted to, and we don't.
So, yeah.
Could I
Thank
ask-
you for that additional clarification.
Would it be, I'm sorry, could I ask a question? Would it be helpful, Kevin, perhaps if that language is explicitly stated somewhere in the plan?
I think that'd
Annexation
be, yeah, I think
policy.
that'd be great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That could certainly be
You
added.
think it'll alleviate some of their concerns?
Commissioner, you said page 109, I'm sorry.
Yeah, page 109, so we're looking at the map, and we're talking about public and private parks and recreation. You know, the parks in Old Town, and then the Buckwalter Regional Park, I didn't see anything. Our next major park, our next major project is the one at the traffic circle 46 and 170, where the barn is. Yeah. Maybe this came more to fruition as this process was going on, but I think that needs to be a major part of the public parks comp plan going forward, is we're developing that and turning that into a hub. And that ties into something else I'll get to in a minute, and I'll refer back to it. Go to 125, please. And this is actually it. Scroll down, if you would, in Palmetto Bluff. The one all the way down south, which would be a village node.
Yes, sir.
Now, first of all, the key on this page doesn't tell us what an old town, a town center node, a village node comprises of.
Yes.
So I think we need definitions. But a village node to me is a place where people from the town can gather and, okay, this is a private gated community, that's not going to happen.
Yes, sir.
So
Yeah.
that may be inappropriate for there, it might be a different one. And to the,
A
Yeah.
different coded node,
yeah, only for them node. No.
private node.
Scroll up just a little bit if you would.
Yes, sir.
When we went through this in '07, Old Town was developed and developing, and Buckwalter Place more or less didn't exist.
Yes, sir.
We defined that Buckwalter Place area as the next kind of downtown. We were Old Town downtown, Buckwalter Place downtown, they look different, multicolored as it is, they're areas for people to gather that live nearby. There's a third one coming, and it's already started developing, and that is the new Riverside Village. So I would suggest that that actually needs to be upped to a town center node, because you've got 7,000 houses being built in New Riverside, larger than the size of the Buckwalter PUD. There's going to be another major node there. So I think that needs to be referenced.
Just to be clear, basically sending that up the hierarchy into.
Drop the one down and send the other up. These are my suggestions.
Sure, I understand,
okay?
yeah.
And then page 139. Okay. It's kind of hard to get the whole concept on this, but actually you do have it on here. Bluffton Parkway, where it meets 170, this comp plan suggests changing what is supposed to be a major commercial area and a major intersection. And the reason I say major intersection, just so everybody's on the same page, you can see Bluffton Parkway extension there. That's going to be exit 3 on I-95. We don't know if it's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. It's going to be exit 3 on I-95. This is going to be a major, major intersection. And to change it to predominantly housing, I don't know that that's the direction that should be done for a major intersection. I'm not saying some of it shouldn't be, but I'm seeing probably, what, 3/4 of it now in the plan as housing. My thoughts. And I don't know how the rest of commission feels about that, but I just feel like we're giving up what people are going to need for shopping and retail and so on, and throwing it to housing and what our guidelines are.
I agree with having some sort of commercial mixed use or something buffer between that and the existing housing, just because it is going to be a major corridor. It already is a big one. but it's going to just add more traffic. So be conscious of how you can buffer that from some of the existing.
Madam Chairman, I'm glad you bring that up. That was obviously a paramount concern here as we thought about this particular area. You guys see it, we see it, right? That extension's a big deal. You know, as we think about the 10-year horizon, that property becomes extremely interesting as that connection is made. In not to defend in particular the colors on this map, but as we thought through this exercise, you know, trying to get the most out of this property and at the same time address as many community goals as possible was of critical importance as well. Certainly understand the idea of the commercial node, Commissioner, and this is an area where we can look into further as well. One thing we are conscious of within this project is the state of retail in the United States at the moment. Obviously, it is a tumultuous time, so we think about that in terms of waiting and thinking through these processes and being a few multiple experiments at once, you know, Commissioner, if that makes any sense. But also understanding, you know, what does the town need to get out of this ground in terms of fiscal productivity is critically important as well.
Yeah. Well, and we do need, don't get me wrong, we need workforce housing. We need, interesting term, I've never heard it before, but middle housing.
Who came up with those designations, like retail, workforce, middle health? Like, where did those come from?
We worked through themes that are present in the rest of in other portions of the plan to try to define some of the concepts that were coming up in the abstract. For instance, we talked about housing. There was a lot of.
But I mean, it's not like town staff or whoever said, okay, this is going to be an area for that. Y'all just kind of were identifying areas that it could be.
We collaborated on that particular part of the process. Yeah, staff and the team, absolutely.
You know, you also have to understand what is currently allowed. So in that PUD, has a general commercial designation as of right now. So it does allow for the retail. It does allow for the housing component to it. You know, the intent is that it's a higher intense use. And you know, even right now, we're seeing a lot of people that are coming in for apartments, requesting to develop apartments. So that's, you know, we talk about that missing housing component. You know, when you dig down in there, the majority of units are single-family detached houses. And
So this isn't necessarily that.
correct, yes.
So would the density allow us to do what this workforce housing, more affordable housing?
Well, workforce housing, affordable housing is, you know, from an economies of scale standpoint, it has to work to where you have to have
Higher density.
higher density in order for it.
Is the higher density allowed in this PUD for this?
Yes.
It is?
But it was my understanding this was straight commercial. I didn't know that residential was allowed or allocated.
Well, so that's where the master plan process comes in, and there is a current master plan on that site. It's called the Buckwalter Crossroads, which does call for commercial development, your typical strip center type development. Now, if someone were to propose, you know, a mixed use development, they're going to come back in front of you with an amendment to that master plan.
And you know what my answer is, my personal answer is going to be, where did you get the density from?
Well, of course, and you know, they have to have the allocated dwelling units, and that's one of the first things that we always confirm to make sure that, you know, that they actually have those units.
And just to make it clear, I mean, in my opinion, we've already allowed for too many houses to be built in this town. So if we're going to allow for any more to be built, they need to take that from something else that's already been approved. But what do you want to say, Richard? You said you weren't going to talk.
I know. I can't keep a promise. In the Buckwalter Development Agreement, there is that flexible transfer of density units from one master planned area to another. Occasionally, like we dealt with, I think it was last month, we discussed some limited density units out in Buckwalter Place, but otherwise, they're pretty freely assignable so that they can transfer from one to another. But you're right, and Mr. Eichert's right, that they're going to have to amend that master plan, and that master plan shows the residential density that they're going to have, and most likely get an assignment or a conditional assignment upon approval.
And that's where I was going, is I just don't want to see us go, poof, here are 300 more units, you know, because it's tough enough already dealing with what's been allocated. But that brings me to, what page is that? 141. I applaud you, whoever it was that put this in here or thought of it, but the fact that it talks about the TDR program and the 1,000 units that are sitting in there, that's something that can apply to workforce housing, and I appreciate it being in there. Figured I'd give you one positive.
Thank you, Commissioner.
That's the majority of what I have, and I'm going to be honest with you, from page 172 on, which are the suggestions. I wouldn't quite go to the word angry, but there are some things in here, such as C3, where it talks about making a medium priority hosting the annual Historic Preservation Symposium, making it a low priority to engage media to educate the public on the historic significance of the town. You know, the historic is a huge part of this town. I mean, there ain't much left from the burning of Bluffton, but it's still a pretty historic town, and we're proud of that. And I'm going to actually, I had the pleasure of talking to Councilman Commissioner, that's what we are, Delcor, I think it was earlier today, and he's got some great insight on that he touched on earlier, and I'm going to defer to him talking about the outcomes here versus what was kind of brought out.
And I think I've made my point. There just seems to be a disconnect between the input we got from the public, and even as far as today's input, that we had the two people give us input, and the steering committee input versus the action plans. And I understand control versus influence.
Yeah, of course.
I guess if I could wave a magic wand, I'd have more action plans to have us doing some influence on things like the economy, natural resources, land use, and traffic. I mean, do I have written out for you? No, I don't. I mean, but that would be something that I think would be good use of our time in collaboration with staff and you guys to put some effort behind between now and whenever we have to approve this.
And Commissioner, I will say, when we begin a process like this, especially with the public, we don't try to truncate, I guess, our thinking, right? I think we want to be as global as possible, especially when we get to the action development phase or policy development phase. And the last thing we want to do is just, I guess, limit the creativity by saying we can't do that because we can't do that. So there are a number, of policies that floated throughout this process that I would say are in that influence category that may be applicable still here. I think what would just be critical, Commissioner, because I've seen in other communities where this has been a challenge, is ensuring that in clear communication and clear terms on here, it's made clear that this is not something that the town of Bluffton can unilaterally go do. As long as you're comfortable with that, I think that language just needs to be clear, because I don't want to set the expectation with your constituents to say that you need to go do this because you said you would, right? So as long as the wording assumes either partnership, it assumes a discourse, right? Or it assumes leveraging a resource that's not guaranteed. I think those things are good blankets for you all as you move forward to say you're accomplishing things, but you still have to work with others to make them real. Is that fair, Commissioner?
Absolutely agree with you, but I also think it's incumbent on us to give it a shot.
Absolutely.
Because our constituency is asking for it.
Absolutely.
So I agree with your points.
Thank you.
Kathleen, do you have any? Or Charlie, are you finished with yours?
That
Or
was
you
it.
go for right the second? Sorry. Kathleen, do you have anything to add to what they've?
You can come back to me. Yeah. I want to hear what Lydia had to say and Mr.
I share some of the concerns that were listed, but I think the people section in general, at least the page 174 in the list of action items, P1 saying to coordinate the provision of human and social services within the community, and then the only action point is to low priority come up with an inventory of what we already have. Feels like maybe that should be part of that should have been part of this process, was inventorying what we have, so that if we're going to coordinate the provision of it, that we actually have some action items related to what do we have, so we can know what we should be doing. It just seems like if we go 10 years and that's the goal, we haven't really made any progress on that overall point.
Absolutely, Commissioner. Appreciate that.
Well, and as long as you're right there, P3 kind of shocked me too, because all three of those are low priorities. Heritage Appreciation Days, holidays, festivals, and events. Continue to support heritage and diversity. I mean, those have
Sure, things we
historically
thrive off
been
of.
high priorities. Yeah.
I also believe, I'm sorry to interrupt, Commissioners, but I do believe that there is, now looking at it through your glasses, which is the task here, there's some need for definition of that term priority. Because I should say that saying something is low, if it's on this list, it's critical to Bluffton, right? I think as we define priority, what we were assuming is how immediate is this action? How necessary is it in the short term, at which it relates then to the time frame? We need to better define that, absolutely. Thank you.
Other comments, I just had, a lot of the language, which I agree with, is that we really love what has happened. We love Old Town, and we would like to see
No
Old
doubt,
Town
right, yeah.
kind of that feeling happen throughout Bluffton. There's limited things that we can do, given how much of the community is within a PUD, but knowing that that's a high priority for constituents, as well as I think probably everyone on the commission, I would like to do what we can to make that a higher priority. So on the let's see, 181.
181?
I think the biggest thing that we probably have control over at this moment would be the L 1.2. We have the Highway Corridor Overlay District established, and that's something that the town has oversight over. So I think coming in with design criteria to improve that, in my opinion, would be a short time frame and a high priority, because that's something that we can actually affect. And if we don't do that now, are we just going to have a bunch of additional development that we haven't applied that thought to, that now we can't change?
Yeah, absolutely. Totally fair.
Well, one of the things I was talking with somebody about the other day is we really need to explore getting Bluffton Parkway and Buck into the Highway Corridor Overlay District, because
I
they're
agree.
not.
Yeah.
Commissioner, do you believe that raises to the level of an action that ought to be related in this plan? Or mentioned as under the umbrella of L 1.2? Sorry, I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Probably its own item.
Okay.
Would make
think
more
it'd be
sense,
its
wouldn't it?
Yeah.
That's when you realize that the HCOD controls 278 and 46 and 170, and you've got the buffers in front of the Kroger on 278, but you get all the trees cut down in front of Hampton Lake's new entrance on Bluffton Parkway, where you could have, if it was in an HCOD, you could have helped it. What'd I do, Kevin? So I think,
We need to revisit it and put it somewhere.
Madam Commissioner, Commissioner Wetmore, one of the issues that we do face, and Commissioner DePaul brought it up earlier, because so much of the town is in the PUD, the development agreements, in particular the Buckwalter Development Agreement, which, and I believe the Schultz Development Agreement as well, are very clear as to which highways are going to be or allowed to be subject to the Highway Corridor Overlay District, which roads, which portions of the parkway. And that's really, even under the existing comprehensive plan that was adopted back in 2007, that's been a critical concern. And I think it's something that we should continue to address and keep in our comprehensive plan, but just know that there may be some difficulties with actually carrying that through to completion because of the contractual obligations the town faces.
But I think when we're talking about influence and other things, that should be on the list of we should try. At a higher priority of what can we do to negotiate that.
The backstopping, yeah, understood. Commissioner, was there any other thoughts you had?
That's all I have to add right now. Thank you.
None at this time.
Elaine, you want to go ahead?
I don't want to dig into all my very, very specific notes. And so I'm trying to
Yeah, give us the overall.
wrap my head around how to stay high level and, and make sure my words are
You have page numbers, maybe like Charlie?
I'm not doing, no, I'm not going to do like, we'd be on every page. I don't want to do that. I kind of want to take some general things that I've taken from here and not go page by page. One of the things that I gained from reading through this was there's a significant focus on the Old Town in this plan. And I absolutely treasure our Old Town, and I absolutely think, like Commissioner Whitmer said, this is our gem, our prize of the town. And so it does need to be of its own distinct character. It needs to be protected, and it... You looked at me real sudden like I was doing something wrong.
Just paying attention.
Oh, okay. And so the rest of Bluffton is growing at an alarming rate, but there's a whole Bluffton state of mind, and I think it's quiet, it's slow, it's deeply enveloped in culture and community and people knowing people, and it's this familiarity of our streets, and it's the art of our streets, and it's the music that happens within our public sphere. And so I do not want to diminish this focus on Old Town, but I would say that so much attention has been focused on Old Town that I think that people that don't live here, that aren't necessarily represented, don't feel represented, and this document to me doesn't go far enough to making sure that they feel represented outside of Old Town. I worry, I see a lot of focus on Gullah Geechee. I love that. That's awesome. I see that the Black community is 10% of the population. We have a Hispanic community that's 17% of the population. There was not, we were talking about events that are held by people in the community. There's 3 or 4 events listed for the Black community. There are none listed for the Hispanic community, and I know that that's not true. So where are their voices in here? Where was their input on here? Where are they talking about who the important people are for them in their community? Where are their pictures? And so they are probably one of the fastest growing outside of, we've got a large number of affluent, educated, retired individuals coming here, but outside of them, I think they're probably one of the largest growing communities, one of the fastest growing communities, and I want them to make sure that they are a part of the fabric of this document, how it's created, and their voices are heard as a part of it. Given my profession, not just sitting on here in this planning commission, but my use of comprehensive plans in my daily job, I look to this document in terms of how I'm writing narratives for zoning, annexation, things like that. And so I'm looking at a very specific parcel of property, and I'm looking at what's the future land use, what's the existing land use, where is it, how is it related to a hamlet or a village, how is it related to the commercial centers. And these maps being spread over 2 pages make that hard to read. Okay. Most people aren't even looking at this document on printed out version. They're looking at it in a PDF on a screen scrolling up. The inventory and analysis within this document, to me, does not go far enough. There's just a lot of pieces of information that I have found in other comprehensive plans that I don't see here, that feed that texture of how you choose, why you choose, what's influencing. And so there's just some things that aren't going far enough. There is a significant focus on resiliency, like a major focus on resiliency in this document, far more than I think just about any other topic. And I recognize that that's not important issue, and particularly for our community. And I actually really liked how you started the conversation with resiliency is a multifaceted thing. It's affected by economy, it is affected by culture, it is affected by a lot of things that are, it's disasters, but not just of the natural kind. But all of the comments, all of the action items are related to natural disaster type. It's related to stormwater, it's related to wetlands. So where's our response to things that are not just of environmental nature, in that resiliency component. Like I said, you started off great, and then there's no response to that in terms of what you did.
Commissioner, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to
No, go
quickly
ahead.
on resilience because people and resilience are new elements that
Yep.
have been added
Yep.
since our previous plan.
And everybody's looking at it the same way as you are. I don't disagree with that.
Yeah, and part, I know, not to make an excuse, but part of the weight piece is that those pieces hadn't been gathered like that, but I totally take your point and
Yeah.
have it written down. Yes, ma'am. Continue, I'm sorry, I apologize.
No, that's okay. One of the things that came up in our last planning commission meeting was a woman from the school district whose name is escaping me at the moment. She's part of the construction and facilities.
Crutchfield.
Carol Crunch.
Crutchfield.
Carol Crunchfield. And she came up to us, there was a project that we were looking at in terms of redoing the master plan, and so it included housing where it had been commercial before. And she said, basically, I see housing going up. Please don't approve things with additional housing that are going to create school children because we are at capacity. And we don't have the funds to accommodate these children. The comprehensive plan, the way it reads, is that either it's in total contrast to that. It's basically saying we're fine according to the strategic plan of the school. So where are we? Do we have an issue with too many students and we're at capacity and we're fine for the next 20 years? Or do we have an issue where we can't approve housing because we can't educate our children? That's a big contrast. There's even the school map it's lumped in there with hospitals and libraries, and I'm like, schools in themselves are their own body of information, like how close you're, and you look at them from a lens of how walkable they are, which puts nobody hardly in walking distance within the town of Bluffton limits to a school. I mean, there are a few that, yes, are, but by and large, you're going to be taking transportation.
Sure.
So perhaps we need to be looking at, because of the way Bluffton is constructed, maybe it's looking at it from bikes. Maybe it's looking at from car travel. Where are we absent on having a school nearby? Because we are going to be needing a school in the next 20 years. We're going to be needing several schools, but there's no direction on where that should be or how that should be focused in relationship to population growth. Even our hospitals, when you look even at the county, there's one in Hilton Head, there's one kind of off, the map, and there's one barely in Bluffton. I mean, we don't have much in the way of hospital facilities. There's no looking at police departments. You haven't done fire EMS. There are so many facilities. Is one library enough for all of Bluffton? I don't know. We've got population that's about to, I don't know if it's going to double, but at least 50. You're projecting 50% on top of what we currently have in the next 20 years. Does our Bluffton library accommodate that? I just don't know, and I don't have any information here that's leading me to any conclusions about whether we need to do something about that. Education is such a key component. Everybody is so interested in that in this community, and this community facilities is like 6 pages long. It's just not going far enough. To the gentleman earlier who spoke, whose name is
Raymond?
Mike Raymond?
Yeah, Mike Raymond, Mr. Raymond. To his point about the economic development, my husband owns a business. We've been trying to get a second location, and every time we go talk to a developer, we get kicked to the curb because Publix is coming in and they have a relationship with with this business from out of town, and so you can't, now you can't be here. And we've been talking to them for 2 years. And this has happened for several locations. That's anecdotal, but when you're talking about how we build entrepreneurs, and I love the Don Ryan Center. I'm so thankful for the Don Ryan Center and what they're doing. I think that there is so much more we can do to help business and entrepreneurs and small business, not just those that are doing things that in innovation, but just people that want to start a business and being educated on insurance and taxes and laws and all that stuff that goes to be a part of that, and how to negotiate contracts and how to negotiate loans. And there's just how do we support that? And I think that's just one piece of the economic puzzle, and it goes to Charlie's point about where are we putting these commercial nodes, and where are we, and again, going to the land use portion of this, where are the commercial nodes? We have got so many people that are coming to this place, whether we like it or not. It's not even hardly up to us. They're coming. So where are we going to put them? And so in order to get, and we're talking about we want affordable housing, and we want middle housing, we want workforce housing. But if we don't have the places for them to go where it is more dense, and I can understand, Charlie, like we don't need to add density, but at the same time, how are we going to get houses to be affordable for the middle income? Because right now, I can tell you my grocery bills have doubled, my gas bills have doubled. And if I want to move out of my house, I'm still just, where am I going to go? And I'm not poor by any means. So to me, we have a really critical housing issue that I'm not sure and economy that's all playing in together. And I'm just not sure this goes far enough to addressing some real critical issues we're facing over the next 20 years.
Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner.
This is why I wanted to wait to the end, because there was just
You're summarizing for us. Thank you.
so much that, so much. There's a major, I think of natural resource, or not recreation. I think, and there's bicycle connections that aren't connected here. There are we've got new Riverside Park. So excited it's coming. We'll actually have some kind of a significant park in Bluffton. And I love that we've actually made these little pocket parks in Old Town. But is there any way that we can start looking at what's a community park? And I think that's even part looking at our communities, because I know that some of our private pre-UDs don't feel like even their recreational needs are being met for their neighborhoods. So I think there needs to be a holistic approach at looking at, are we meeting the neighborhood park need? Are we meeting the community park need? Are we meeting the regional park need? Are we accommodating the people on bicycles? Are we accommodating people that are doing disc golf? Are we accommodating our soccer fields? And perhaps we need to start looking at a recreational needs assessment and start encouraging a really in-depth look at that as a part of this. One of the things I also looked at today was the amount of growth and development. I was looking at Old Town specifically, and just the amount of loss. I was just thinking of it in terms of figure relief of the number of buildings, where those buildings. It's actually started as an exercise at looking at Calhoun Street. I was trying to find where were the buildings and where are the buildings, and how many buildings have we added? And
In terms of infill.
yeah.
Absolutely.
And to look at the last 20 to 30 years in Bluffton and the tree loss that we've had through all of this development just in our Old Town area. And it's one of those, like, I want a snapshot of, when we talk about Bluffton state of mind, and what were we? How did we, what did we look like at the time when this kind of idea of Bluffton state of mind came to be? And if we're going to preserve that, what does that need to look? And that's why I was looking at Calhoun Street, because I'm looking at this Old Town area. And when we start infilling, like we're infilling, and I know why that happened, because the last comprehensive plan was really leading us into a direction of more urbanist type development in Old Town and really creating a vibrancy. But do we still want to continue that pattern as we move forward? Or do we want to kind of say, we're full in Old Town, and we don't want more people packing more into this little Old Town that we have? Like, park on the outside, we'll transport you in. Do we really want to be telling do we really need to be marketing? I think one of the action items was to market Old Town for tourism. And I can tell you, I don't think the people that live there want that. They're like, there's so many people, I can't park, I can't move, there's noise all the time. And so when we're saying, hey, keep pushing them in here, and they're like, please stop. And then it doesn't feel like Old Town anymore. And maybe we're too far gone and we can't capture that. And I think that's what goes back to what Commissioner Delcor's idea of, again, back to this Bluffton state of mind. I think it is in our history. It's in our culture. It's in those conversations. It's in those meetings and those gatherings, in the places that has history. So it's
a tricky thing, a place like Old Town.
It is.
Because you can't freeze it.
Nope.
it moves. No matter how old it is, it's moving. And the stewardship aspect is one of the most critical things. And I was on State of Mind Street today, right? You know, I understand it, and I see the infill. We see the infill. There's probably projects that you love, probably projects that you maybe regret. It's in that movement, though, especially in your core, your heart of your community, that where a lot of the attention gets paid, right? And I think, Commissioner, one of the things I think picked up on some earlier comments you make is Bluffton's not just Old Town anymore either, right? And as we think about the growth that's occurred, significant exponential growth that's occurred around Old Town, does that same level of consideration extend? I think you do a pretty good job, frankly, outside in, but I think your point there is well taken and very, very important. Absolutely.
By the way, State of Mind Street was completed in 2005, so it hasn't been around for long.
That too.
Just saying.
I figured as much. Yeah.
I think there was a comment from Ms.
Colin or
Carmen Manning.
Yep.
About, I think it was Green Streets, LEED. Should we be looking at B City? Like, how do we,
Yeah.
how do we foster some of that? I know there's hints at it in here, but how do we push that to and again, that may be an influence control thing.
Actually, that's an area where I think this commission and this community does have quite a bit of control. What I would suggest, though, and would love some feedback on this, Commissioner, is what are because there are endless programs now that play in that playground, right?
Yep.
What are the programs that you think most align with the goals of this community when it comes to environmental stewardship, when it comes to equity, when it comes to vibrancy? There are a number of programs that have emerged. You talk about LEED's the sort of the standard, but I love the mention of Green Streets. I think that's a great program. There's several else that are out there. So what I would love, I think as part of feedback to this, is are there ones you'd like for us to look into in greater depth and see how they apply to the town? Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think you should also, you know that a lot of the roads that are obviously already established through Old Town, the town is in the process of acquiring a lot of these ghost roads. We're also, as you've gone through and you've looked at the CIP projects that we have, one of them that's actually going to start construction hopefully very soon is on Ridge Street, is where we're going in, and we have they're going to be, taking out a lot of the excess pavement that's there, providing, green space, providing cisterns underneath to help to collect the stormwater in order to treat it before it's discharged into the cove. So we are doing a lot of these things. Like everything, it's funding. It's just, it takes time to work through these projects. I know that we are in that process. We're in the process with Calhoun Street, same thing. That's going to be a major undertaking. So it's there slowly, but some of it it's private development, and it's difficult to get them to do certain things. Now, obviously, with our stormwater regulations that have just been passed, I mean that's a huge, it's a huge item that causes the developments to be more of a more low impact design. So a lot of the things, a lot of the concerns that, I've heard, some of them, they are being addressed. There are various ways to get about this, and I know you have to remember that the comprehensive plan, it's setting the tone and giving town council the vision over those 10 years to set their priorities as they move forward with their strategic plans. So you talk about, the tree canopy. That's a great thing to include as a future plan. Doesn't necessarily, we can't address that in the comp plan, but one of those recommendations is let's focus on that. Let's focus on, picking streets and seeing what issues that we need to focus on. A lot of that, and one of the recommendations that we have, and we already know, is an update to the Old Town Master Plan. So you talked about that vision over 20 years. Like we're going to look back and see, okay, back then when it started, and then where we are today, and then what changes need to be made. So again, that document's we're gonna work on that document. Buck Island Simmonsville neighborhood. We've actually already went ahead and budgeted funding to move forward with updating the neighborhood plan there. So, we know that these things are coming, and kind of like what Kyle says, nothing is, just because it says a low priority on there doesn't mean it's a low priority, and I'm just gonna take what he has. Those recommendations that are ranked as low priority are not unimportant. They simply fall lower on the priority scale, or their success depends upon completion of other recommendations. So, I know that you probably still have tons of items that you want addressed. Hopefully you have them written down.
I do.
What we would love is to be able to get a copy of your information, and even if we need to have an offline meeting, so that way we can see what items you want. We can work on addressing all of those. So that way, our goal is to come back on the 13th, hitting the highlights of what you guys have talked about. So that way we've kind of, we're at draft 3.0. I don't know if that's 3.5 or 4.0, whatever it is. Having that kind of revised document back in front of you, going over like, yes, we've updated these items. We've focused on the priorities. We've focused on, keying in on some of these other items that have been discussed, the growth framework map. We can get all those taken care of, so that way you have another opportunity to look at this in a public setting. And if there's still some minor tweaks, we can even make those tweaks before it gets to your July 27th meeting. So that way you guys are comfortable in providing a recommendation. And as I stated, it's a living document. So if things start changing, or we realize that something that we missed, we can always go back and make changes to it. So it's our document. We have the right to do that. Obviously, town council ultimately, makes those decisions. But I just want you to know that if something is missed for any particular reason, we have that ability to make those changes.
Kevin, when should we get our comments back so that revisions can be done, and when would we get the revisions before the next meeting?
Well, that's as soon as possible. So, it's what, 8:06 right now? If you can get them to us before 10 o'clock tonight, that'd be
Not going to happen before this weekend.
yes.
And that's part of the challenge, and we all know this, but to say it, we got the document on Friday, and we've had, and it just is what it is. We've had 5 days to look at it.
Yeah.
I haven't had a chance to read through it thoroughly. What I gave you tonight was scanning, and I'm sure some of the other commissioners are the same way.
Absolutely.
And, God, I hate to put it this way, but the longer we can have to give you the comments and the quicker you can turn them around, the better.
But, yeah.
Commissioner, I fully respect that, and I know that you should and ought to go through line by line, and you want to give detailed and general pieces, and I think that we'll take that. I hesitate to assign a date deadline. I won't do that to you right now. I'll think through backwards from our deadlines here, but I would just want to say I truly do appreciate the partnership that this represents and the feedback that you give us. When you do this work, you end up sort of putting something out, and then there's the reaction, right? And I think this refinement piece of it is just so critical to getting it right. Commissioner, I think, Duncan, what you bring up is just how important this is, right? You're at a critical moment in this community's history. The tone you set today is going to be important. So we want to make sure that as this is written, as this is articulated, it's done in the correct way, and it provides you with the information and the setting that you need to move forward. So I think the one thing I would ask, if possible through the comments, is if PDFs do work quite well. If you would like to handwrite them, that's also fine. I think in scan, we can have Charlotte, Kevin, we can scan those in, get those to us. But through a PDF, I think is going to be the best way, most efficient way for our team to work through them.
I had one more thing. There's a 2040 Beaufort County comp plan. It's not listed as an item you've referenced in preparing this.
Mm-hmm.
So being that we're in Beaufort County and that's a new fresh document, it might be something that
Absolutely.
y'all are mindful of is how they're thinking of Bluffton and how we're thinking of Bluffton, because I'm not exactly sure that we're all on the same page.
Yeah, and that's an oversight, Commissioner. We're certainly aware of that document, that process, but we'll be overt. And thank you.
I did have just one other thing. It's more to Kevin, I think. Kevin, when I look at the last comp plan, it had 10 action items for affordable housing. I'm just curious, what have we accomplished during this period? Because, quite frankly, there's some duplication of the wording of this comp plan's affordable housing words versus the last one. Is there any way to get a feel for what have we accomplished?
Bill Wharf Street.
Excuse me?
We built the cottages on Wharf Street.
May I? Yeah, go ahead. So there are a number of different action items that are either in process or have been approved and completed. There's Wharf Street. There was a density bonus incorporated as a UDO amendment to try to encourage affordable housing. That was obviously supported by the comprehensive plan. There was the First Amendment to the VIII Development Agreement, which required the construction of, or the designation of 20 of the total number of units out there for affordable housing, and I believe 19 of them have either been constructed and are being rented out.
I guess what I'm looking for is how many units?
So,
Dozens or hundreds?
Well, some of it was repairs.
You can't think of just the number of units of land acquisition. So the town has purchased properties, hundreds of thousands of dollars is spent on purchasing the property, knowing that like we're in the process, like we have plans, we're going through contractual plans right now for the construction on various properties of, so about how many units?
so there's at least one that's under, that town council approved at either the last meeting or the meeting before, that's going to be between 12 to 14 units. But there are two other parcels that are being considered that have, dozens of units.
4 to 8, and then the other one has approximately 65, and then the town has property out at Buckwalter, PUD for an additional potential for, 200 units. So it's just, a lot of these, we talked about that priority list and how certain things have to happen to get those. It's a game of chess. You have to move certain ways in order to for the end goal. So we talked about, we've purchased 3 properties, and we've also acquired, I think for the Buckwalter one, that was part of the, I think that was one of the amendments.
As part of the Willow Run Development Agreement, which was, I think, the 5th Amendment or so to the Buckwalter Development Agreement. And that's the biggest issue, right? The biggest issue with that project is the infrastructure, the access. The road's gonna cost a fortune to build. There are also other steps that the town has taken. There was the small home series that was completed back in 2011 or 2012, which wasn't seized upon by any developers, but it was the idea was to create a process to kind of expedite the construction of, maybe not 100% AMI or lower housing, but more affordable housing, more of that middle housing to help fix that. So there have been a number of different steps that the town has taken. It's just, a lot of times with affordable housing issues, and having, just kind of go on a little tangent here, I was the chairman of the Beaufort Housing Authority for 7 years. So I got to see a lot firsthand as to what the town was doing, county, city of Beaufort, what the housing authority was doing, and just the investment of the town of Bluffton into making sure that affordable housing was always a priority, whether it was the density bonus programs, working with impact fees, and the reduction of impact fees for affordable housing. You have, anytime a new PUD is brought into the town, there's a 20% has to be affordable. So this is, what's the?
St. Gregory the Great's required.
St. Gregory the Great. So it's I guess the old saying, what's the best way to eat an elephant was in small bites. And so that's kind of what we're doing in the elephant is the affordable housing issue.
And I think also the establishment of the Affordable Housing Committee, the establishment of the Neighborhood Assistance Program. So, the town allocates approximately $190,000 every budget year to help, and we talk about in here, the NOAA, the naturally occurring affordable housing, to help individuals to be able to stay in their homes with these repairs. So, to say just like a number, like, well, did you go from 5 to 10? Like, that's not, we can't really measure it that way. So there's a lot of factors that are in play that, a lot of resources are consuming to get there. So
I'll say this much. We do a lot more than any other community around here as far as I'm concerned. We still don't do enough.
Well, we
at least are moving in the right direction.
and I didn't even bring up the Regional Housing Trust Fund that we're part of. So there's there's a lot of avenues out there, you know, and it's just, it takes time. It takes time. It takes a lot of money.
Thank you.
Have any developers taken the town up on this bonus density for adding affordable housing? Where it's not imposed through the PUD, but where they're bringing in a development and asking for additional density and providing it with affordable.
As of right now, none.
How long has that been in place?
A year?
The density bonus that's in the UDO, I think that was brought in 2016, perhaps, maybe 2015, 2016.
We're looking at 7-8 years at least.
And the problem is, I don't want to say the problem, part of the limitations is it's somewhat limited in area as well, geographically. So you have certain areas where when this was originally drafted, where that density could be increased for affordable housing. And frankly, from what I can recall, some of those areas still haven't really been primed for development. I think one of those areas is off of, kind of at the corner of Buck Island Road and May River Road. So not on the Parker side, but back behind the health food store in that area. That's one of those, and we just haven't seen the development go out in that area. Everything's been kind of building from Old Town out and then within the development agreement areas. So that's part of it. We still expect or hope that will be used in the future. And then obviously any PUD that's coming in, that was a change that brought an immediate benefit with St. Gregory the Great, having to designate 20% of their units to affordable housing if they do construct them.
In terms of the Affordable Housing Committee, and are they going through and as part of what they're doing and discussing, are they sitting down going, okay, this measure was working, this one is not working, here's an idea we have to make this, to massage this effort to make it, try to get a little further. If in 8 years or 7 years, nobody's taken up the bonus density as they're developing, and we've got a lot of developments going on, should we be asking why and what can we do?
You also have to remember that we're talking about 8% of the town's limits is regulated by the UDO. So you're seeing a lot of development happen out in Buckwalter, New Riverside. They don't qualify. So only certain properties qualify for it. So
Thank you.
yeah, I think we've got
enough
a lot of
information, high level.
If you guys have documentation, please submit it to staff and we can get it to the consultant. Anything that you've actually already, typed out, that's great. It's a lot easier that way as well. But we can definitely take anything that you have. If you have specific sheets that you've worked on, you can feel free to scan those in and send them to us, or you can even drop them off here and we're happy to scan them in and get them over to Kyle. So.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
With
Have a
that,
motion.
do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Thank you.
Thank you very much.